In the heart of New York, tucked between a laundromat and a pawn shop, stood a restaurant everyone swore had the best lamb stew in the city. But what if I told you the flavor people loved wasn't lamb at all? What if behind the kitchen door, police uncovered cages, bones, and a boiling pot hiding a truth too horrifying to imagine? Tonight, we dive into one of New York's most disturbing cases, the story of the restaurant that fed the city lies. One spoonful at a time. New York stays awake, but Queens is where the city's stomach growls the loudest. Wedged between a 24-hour laundromat and a dusty pawn shop, a small restaurant called Al Quds Lamb Stew glowed like a promise. Taxi drivers swore by it, night shift workers claimed it tasted like survival, and locals whispered it had a sweetness no other place could match. Detective Elena Cruz didn't come for flavor. She came because the reports were stacking high. Stray dogs vanishing, alley cats never returning, and anonymous notes muttering. At night, behind the kitchen, you can hear barking that stops too suddenly. She ordered the lamb stew. The first spoonful told her everything she needed. The meat was too soft, sliding off the tongue in a way lamb never did. The fat was greasy, the sweetness wrong, familiar, but not right. Elena grew up in the Bronx, surrounded by mutts and mongrels, and she knew the taste she was feeling in her mouth wasn't supposed to belong in any recipe. Outside, the number 7 train screeched like a complaint across the sky. Inside, the owner Hassan Rami smiled politely, eyes glazed like dirty glass. Elena set the spoon down. The missing reports began to rearrange themselves in her mind like pieces of a puzzle she wished she hadn't started. Sometimes the truth doesn't come from evidence. It comes first from taste. The alley behind the restaurant was as narrow as an unfinished sentence. Trash bins leaked dark grease, their puddles forming crescent shapes on the concrete. Delivery boys told the same story, each with slight variations. Late-night vans without plates, 2 men carrying cages wrapped in tarps, scratching sounds muffled, sometimes a whimper cut off like a gasp. Elena pulled the supply records. The invoices for lamb were immaculate, too immaculate. Suppliers had changed names 3 times in a year, all registered to empty office mailboxes. Cameras in the back lot broke down with suspicious regularity, especially on Tuesday and Thursday nights. The laundromat owner next door wrinkled her nose. I've seen bags, heavy ones, smelled like wet fur. You know what that means. Cruz stood at the steel door leading into the kitchen, fingers brushing the cold handle. The air had that faint metallic dampness, like coins pressed too long in the palm. She thumbed her recorder and whispered a note. Palettes can lie. Paperwork can be forged. But patterns? Patterns tell the truth. The elevated train rumbled overhead, rattling loose grit from the brick wall. Somewhere under the flickering light, the manhole cover trembled as though even the sewers wanted to speak. Morning brought the inspection. Elena flashed her NYPD badge beside a nervous young health officer who still said, please, before opening doors. Hassan's smile was calm, his apron spotless, his voice oily as he spread his arms. Kitchen's clean, detective. Have a look. Under fluorescent light, everything gleamed. White tile walls, sharpened knives, sanitized counters. But at the far end, a storage room door stood ajar. On the floor near it, strands of matted fur stuck to dried streaks of water. Elena crouched low, shining her flashlight. Parallel scratches etched into the steel frame, desperate claw marks that didn't belong to lambs. Inside the cold room, styrofoam crates stacked high bore labels scrawled in black marker. Lamb. One box had its tape already split. The health officer peeled it open. A wave of odor rolled out. Not herbs, not lamb, but the sharp stench of wet kennel straw and old blood. Among the wrapped meat sat a fragment of bone, unmistakable, the long snout and teeth of a dog's skull. "Hassan Rami," Elena said evenly. "We're seizing every box in this room." His smirk didn't fade. "Stray dogs. No one claims them. My customers pay for lamb, and I give them flavor. Is that really a crime?" Elena didn't answer. Her pen scratched across the evidence log, each letter heavy as judgment. Behind her, the bubbling of a pot echoed like a denial that had run out of excuses. Paperwork in New York is a kind of theater. Everyone plays a part, and the program never lists the real producers. Elena spent 2 days at her desk, peeling labels from the lamb supply chain. The invoices looked clean, almost proud of themselves, weights that rounded too neatly, deliveries that always hit midnight, signatures in the same tight hand, despite 3 different vendors. A DBA search pulled up a shell ladder. Queen's Halal Imports became Astoria Heritage Foods, which re-registered as East Borough Provisions at a mailbox on the 12th floor of a building with 11 floors. Cross-checking health inspections, Elena found inexplicable waivers, the kind that happen when a file gets a phone call before it's opened. A deli's exterior camera, aimed the wrong way to be legal and the right way to be useful, caught partial plates from a grey van. DMV records linked it to Costa Logistics, a one-truck outfit with a driver named Marek Costa, priors for animal cruelty upstate. Animal control, half understaffed and twice exhausted, flagged a surge of missing stray packs around rail yards where Costa parked. Late that night, Elena and an ADA hammered out affidavits under dead fluorescent hum. The judge on duty, a woman with insomnia and a memory for grief, read the motion twice and signed. The warrant covered cold storage, office files, and any containers reasonably believed to hold animal products represented as lamb. Elena slid the paper into a folder and exhaled. Theatre or not, this was an opening night. At dawn, they would raise the curtain. They went in at 6:07 a.m., the hour kitchens stretch and yawn. 2 squad cars boxed the curb. Health inspectors in disposable blues followed the stack through the front. A line cook dropped a ladle. Someone in the dining room shouted, then pretended it was about the coffee. Elena moved straight to the back, the warrant unfolding in her voice. "NYPD, hands where I can see them. Kill the burners." Hassan stepped out of the office with that laminated smile, then saw the uniforms, the cameras, the blue tape. His smile faltered like a bad bridge. The cold room coughed vapors as seals snapped. Crates labeled lamb came down one by one onto stainless steel, their contents photographed, weighed, bagged. A health officer read off measurements, another scraped residue into vials. In a side corridor, Elena found 3 folding cages collapsed and stacked, metal still warm to the touch. Costa arrived mid-raid with a receipt book and a face that said he had parked 2 blocks away in case of precisely this. He tried to back out. A uniform was already there. "Stay!" From the kitchen, a shout. "Detective!" They had rolled a stock pot off the burner and onto a dolly. Elena leaned over the rim, keeping her face neutral. The broth was cloudy with rendered fat, the cuts uneven, the smell unmistakable if you had ever stood near a shelter on intake day. She closed her eyes for the length of a heartbeat, then nodded. "Seal it. Tag it. Move the patrons outside." Hassan finally spoke, voice thin. "You can't taste paperwork," he said. "No," Elena answered, "but you can read it." The lab wrote the story in numbers, but the shock arrived by hand. While cataloguing a bin of trimmings, a tech lifted a small ziplock from the bottom, a sandwich bag of metal discs and plastic shards, collars, buckles, tag fragments, a rabies charm stamped with a clinic's phone number. Elena borrowed a microchip scanner from Animal Control and swept it over a tray of lamb cuts. The first pass was silent. The second chirped. Once, then again, high and soft like a toy. Embedded in a strip of shoulder was a rice grain chip that still remembered an owner. The database spat up a name, an address in Jackson Heights, a photo of a brown mutt with one ear that wouldn't stay down. The report said lost. The date was 6 weeks ago. In interview, Hassan played philosopher. "Meat is meat," he said. "In my country, hunger teaches truth." Elena slid the photo across. "In mine, this dog had a name." His eyes flicked down and away. The room shrank. Costa cracked first. The van, the traps by the tracks, the nighttime handoffs paid in cash and stew. A supplier 2 boroughs over, 3 more restaurants buying lamb at a price too good to be legal. Names tumbled. An ADA made lists. A detective flipped a whiteboard to its stained side and kept writing. The story would make the news in headlines and protests. The shock, though, lived smaller. In kitchen tiles scrubbed too clean, in bowls people had praised, in a scanner's lonely chirp that turned flavor back into a life. By nightfall, the story was everywhere. Queen's restaurant served dog meat as lamb, police say. The tabloids went feral. The anchors polished their disgust. Social media had its hashtags ready. Dog Stew NYC, Justice for Strays, Butcher's Secret. The block outside the restaurant became a theater of anger. Animal rights activists waved placards and chanted. Neighbors shouted curses across barricades. A man held up a leash with no dog on the end and wept until cameras found him. But the outrage fractured. Some voices demanded prison, others demanded deportation. And in corners, Elena heard quieter words. If it was that good, what's the difference? The city's appetite had confessed more than it meant to. At the precinct, Elena watched the footage loop on a mounted TV. Hassan, cuffed, shouting about flavor, protesters screaming, officers trying to hold a line that already felt broken. She shut it off. The ADA called. "We'll charge cruelty, fraud, misrepresentation. But the public wants a monster. He's only one man. If we stop there, it looks tidy, too tidy." Elena knew. Monsters don't run supply chains. Paperwork did. And paperwork was pointing elsewhere. The van was just one spoke in a wheel. Following Costa's phone records, Elena traced midnight calls to a warehouse in Hunts Point. The warehouse belonged to Tri-Borough Provisions, a company that claimed to import lamb from New Zealand. Customs logs showed containers, but the manifests didn't match the weight. Animal Control had been filing quiet complaints for years. Feral packs near the Bronx River disappearing in bulk. Shelters reporting break-ins, missing cages. No one had tied it together. Now, with Costa talking, the lines formed a map. Elena walked the warehouse with a warrant and a sinking gut. Hooks bolted to rafters, drains in the floor, a ledger that listed units without species. Invoices showed deliveries to 5 restaurants besides Hassan's. All signed by the same hand, initials looped and smug. The network wasn't about hunger. It was about margins. Selling lamb was expensive. Selling lamb cut from stray dogs was nearly free. Customers ate tradition. The network pocketed the difference. Back at the squad, Elena sketched circles on a board. Each name, each restaurant, each truck. The picture looked less like crime and more like commerce. Commerce built on bodies no one had been taught to count. The raid on Hunts Point cracked the rest open. Behind steel doors, officers found pens built from welded mesh, floors layered with straw and filth. Dozens of collars lay tossed in a corner, some with tags still jingling faintly. Elena walked the rows, listening. No barking, just silence pressed flat against the walls. The absence made her throat tighten harder than any scream could. Animal rights volunteers arrived, faces pale. They collected bones from pits behind the warehouse, bagging them like evidence, which they were. One woman knelt, lifting a chewed rope leash as if it were a relic. Reporters framed it as cruelty. Elena framed it as theft. Not just theft of animals, but of the bond they represented. Dogs that had guarded stoops, chased sticks in parks, warmed laps in apartments. Each chip scanned, each collar tagged, pulled up a missing report filed by someone who had waited by a door that never opened again. That night, Elena sat in her car and wrote the line she wished no detective had to write. Victims identified by silence. The case was no longer about one restaurant. It was about a city that had mistaken absence for convenience and taste for truth. The courthouse smelled of wet coats and old paper. Hassan sat at the defense table in a borrowed suit, his hands cuffed, but his eyes free and burning. Cameras blinked from the gallery. Protesters shouted in the hallway until the judge threatened contempt on a city she couldn't reach. The prosecution laid it bare. Mislabeled crates, seized invoices, DNA from bones, collars, chips. Photos of the stockpot circulated like a grotesque recipe card. Each exhibit stacked on the last until the weight was suffocating. Hassan's lawyer leaned into theatre. Meat is meat, he told the jury. The law distinguishes species, but hunger does not. Was it fraud? Perhaps. Was it cruelty? Define cruelty in a city that slaughters animals every day for profit. My client is guilty of giving customers exactly what they asked for. A flavor. The words landed like glass on tile, shattering, sharp. Some jurors looked sick. Others looked unsure. Elena watched from the back row, pen gripped tight. The truth of cases like these wasn't always about evidence. It was about what people chose to believe about themselves. The judge recessed. Outside, the crowd screamed louder. Signs with paw prints, signs with blood drops, and signs that simply said, "Never again." When the verdict came, it landed without music. Guilty on fraud, guilty on misrepresentation, guilty on animal cruelty. The network had been pierced by Costa's testimony and by ledgers too arrogant to hide. The judge read years off the calendar, one after another, until Hassan's shoulders finally slumped. Elena felt no triumph. Sentences don't stitch wounds, they just mark them. The other restaurants closed under investigation, their owners claiming ignorance as if ignorance were edible. Tri-borough provisions folded overnight, its directors vanishing into paperwork like ghosts back into fog. Animal control began combing vacant lots, pulling up shallow pits that had hidden bones under trash. Volunteers carried out bags heavy with what had been lives. Each discovery became a headline. Each headline fed outrage. Hassan left the courtroom under guard, face still defiant, lips moving in silent curses. Outside, chants echoed down Center Street. "Justice," some shouted, others spat. The air stank of anger, but also of relief, like a wound cleaned but not healed. Weeks later, the restaurant sign still dangled over a boarded door, letters peeling under February wind. Spray painted across the plywood. "Dog killer." Someone else had scrawled over it, "You ate it." Elena walked past on her way home, collar up against the cold. She thought of that first spoonful, the softness, the sweetness wrong. She thought of the families still putting up flyers for dogs that would never come back. She thought of a city that had eaten bowls of stew, praised them, and asked for seconds. The true crime wasn't just in the kitchen. It was in the silence of customers who never questioned flavor, in inspectors who signed papers too fast, in neighbors who looked away. Monsters don't thrive alone. They thrive in appetite and apathy. Elena closed her notebook with the final line. The taste lingers longer than the sentence. The city swallowed more than stew. It swallowed its own conscience. In New York, hunger always finds something to feed on, and sometimes what it feeds on never leaves your mouth.